Imagine you've been planning a trip for months, maybe years. You've been working hard, saving your money, and you've got it all planned and it's actually been booked, and you are at the airport ready to get on your flight. But you get denied boarding. What happened? Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a travel advisor in Ontario, Canada. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Michelle Plans Travel. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what you need to get into other countries, whether it be visas, ETAs, online forms, things like that. Now, important disclaimer, this video is for informational purposes only, and the information that I'm providing is current at the date of filming, which is June 2026. All travelers must do their own due diligence. Honestly, you do have to check into what you need to go to the country you're flying to. So it's actually not a travel advisor's role to get you what you need. We should advise you of what you need, but it is your responsibility to get the documentation that you need before you travel. So I'm going to start with a question that we've gotten quite a bit this year, and in the past I've gotten this a fair amount too, and that is, why does my passport need to be valid for 6 months past the date of my travel? So it's a great question. The reason your passport needs to be valid for at least 6 months past the date of your return to Canada is so that you don't get stuck in another country and are there illegally. So for example, if something happens and you require medical assistance, you have to go into the hospital for a certain time while you're in another country, you could be there for a while and they don't want your validity or your passport expiring while you're there, because it causes problems for both them and for you. A lot of countries will allow us to visit for up to 180 days without a visa. So the 6-month rule kind of protects that and makes sure that it's not expiring during those 180 days. So airlines will often enforce this rule as you're boarding the plane. And that's why you might get denied boarding if your passport isn't valid for long enough, because airlines are actually legally and financially responsible to deport you back to where you came from if you do not meet the right entry requirements. Some countries actually won't even allow you to transit through their airports if your passport is not valid for 6 months past that date of transit. As travel advisors, we always use the 6-month rule because it just keeps everybody safe and you know what you're in for, basically. Canadians enjoy visa-free tourist travel to 182 countries, which is fantastic. But we do actually now require ETAs, or electronic travel authorizations, to a few popular countries. So, the United Kingdom, which incorporates England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, we need an ETA for there. We need one for New Zealand, Australia, and we also need one for Thailand. It's important to note that with an ETA, every single person that's traveling with you, whether they be infants, toddlers, whoever, everybody needs an ETA, not just the lead passenger. And it's also important to note that ETAs, while they are valid for anywhere between 1, 2, and 3 years, if your passport expires in the midst of that validity, it doesn't necessarily transfer the ETA over to your new passport. So that is something that you have to check into. I'm going to touch on something a little more in depth with the UK ETA and the new UK rules that just came out in February a little bit later on in the video, so stay tuned. Something that's happening this year is that a lot of countries are going to switch and they're going to require an ETIAS, which is, and I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong, European Travel Information and Authorization System. So that is going to be something that's required for many countries that Canadians like to frequent. So France, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Holland, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland, all of those places are going to require it. What's currently happening, because they haven't rolled out the ETIAS yet, is the EES, which is the entry and exit system. And what they're doing is they're collecting biometric information from every non-EU traveler going through their airports. And by that, I mean they are collecting your fingerprint data and they're doing a facial scan of every single non-EU resident or a non-EU citizen that's going through the airport. So you can imagine what this is doing to immigration lines and most especially your transit times. So right now, I am not suggesting that anybody transit through a European airport if they have less than about 4 hours of transit time. And that's a bummer because we used to be like, oh, 2.5 hours, you should be good to go. And some airports, if they're small, even an hour to an hour and a half. But right now, just not suggesting anything less than 4 hours. People have been missing flights. There have been some reports of lineups they're in for 7 hours because of system glitches. It's just a bit of a mess right now while they try and get it sorted out and get everything streamlined. Now, the EU is rolling out an app which is called Travel to Europe. It'll be an official app where you can actually upload your biometric information, I guess, and save you time during this transiting or during these immigration things. However, currently, only a couple of countries have it. So I believe Switzerland has it. It was reported that Portugal had it, but I don't think they fully have it right now. So more information on that coming. And then the actual ETIAS is supposed to be taking place. They keep saying in the last quarter of 2026. We don't really know what that means. So stay tuned. I'm sure we'll all hear about it. Speaking of apps, it might be worth your while to take another look as a Canadian at the ArriveCan app. Yes, that ArriveCan app. They have, I'm not sure if it's been revamped, but basically if you download that and you enter your information, it can save you quite a bit of time when you're coming back to Canada. You can bypass a lot of the longer lineups. And we all know that sometimes when you get those international flights all coming in at once, it's a crazy mess. It definitely is at Pearson. So if you use that app, the ArriveCan app, it can save you a significant amount of time coming back to Canada. All of the major airports are doing it. So Toronto Pearson, actually, I've heard that Toronto City Airport might be doing it too, but Pearson, Montreal, Vancouver, I believe Halifax, Edmonton, and Calgary are all using that ArriveCan app feature when you land. Okay, let's dive in a little bit deeper into what's happening with the UK rules and regulations. So in February of this year, we as travel advisors, I would say most of us were taken by surprise by a new regulation that basically says that if you are a British citizen, you must have your British passport to enter the UK. And we have read numerous articles, both from the UK and Canada. We have Googled, we have researched. I've had my cousin sending me information over from England, and all of the information basically says the same thing. And that is, if you are a British citizen, whether you're a dual citizen or not, and if you've ever just had British citizenship in the past, you have to have your British passport. So I'll give you some examples. A good friend of mine was born in Liverpool, and she moved to Canada when I think she was about 6. She never had a British passport because back in those days, you did not need one. You could travel on your parents' passport to come to another country. She's never held a British passport. She had booked flights to somewhere in the UK. She had gotten her ETA. It was all approved, and she was leaving in approximately 8 weeks. And this rolled out, and she had to get her British passport. Fortunately for her, the system was fairly quick because she had an airline ticket and she was able to prove that she was flying, and they got her through pretty quickly. So that's one example. Second example is my parents, who have been Canadian citizens since 1987, but they've been dual citizens. They let their UK passports expire in 2014. Never been a problem. They traveled last year on an ETA. They now need to renew or redo their British passports in order to travel to the UK. And myself, I had a British passport from the time I was baby until I was 18 because my parents are British and they got me one. So because I have claimed citizenship in the past, technically, I also need to get my British passport, my UK passport, before I go back. Now, all of these things are, well, the first example is absolutely has to happen. The second example absolutely has to happen. The third example of myself, we're not 100% sure if I actually need to get it because no one can tell me, but we're going to err on the side of caution and I'm going to get it anyway. The other thing that started happening recently, I would say in the last couple of years as well, is that many countries that we as Canadians like to frequent, especially in the winter, they now require online forms to be filled out. So these aren't necessarily visas or ETAs, but they're sort of just online entry forms that you have to fill out in order for them to let you in, basically. Now, whether or not you would get denied boarding, I don't know, but I wouldn't take the chance. So some of those countries, for example, are Barbados, Jamaica, Cuba. When it was active, Cuba does require one. Dominican Republic. Some of them have a cost and some of them don't. So just be aware that those things are out there. And again, I do have to say, as travel advisors, it is part of our job to tell you what is required for you to travel. And then it's your job to make sure that you have all of the things that are required. Something that does come up a fair amount, and I've had it quite recently, is the issue of traveling with children. Maybe you're taking friends' kids on a trip, or maybe you're taking your kids' friends on a trip. Or maybe you're taking your own children who have another parent, another custodial parent or guardian on a trip. And this can be a trip out of the country, or it actually can even be a trip just out of the province, which is something new that I learned this past spring, was that it was also required for just out of province travel. You are required to have a letter of consent that is signed by the parent. And in the case of a custodial agreement, by the other custodial parent. It basically, there actually is a form online that you can download from the Government of Canada, and that is what I recommend doing. Basically on there, it'll say, the name of the child, where you're going, when you're going, who they're going with, where they're going, like to stay. And then it has the information for the parent, contact information, and things like that. And the child's identification, not just a copy of the identification, no matter what it says online, because I have phoned the airlines and asked them, you need to have the actual birth certificate or the actual passport or the actual whatever identification you are traveling with. So you need to have that, the signed consent letter, and then it's a good idea to have a copy of the parent's identification as well. So the other parent who has custody, or if it's a guardian, that guardian's identification as well. So just a note there. I know people will say to me, and I've had the same experience myself, well, they've never asked me. But there have been reports, I believe it was just a couple of years ago, when grandparents were traveling with their grandkids because the parents had already gone down somewhere and they were following along, and the children, everybody was just denied boarding because they didn't have the consent letter. So it's one of those situations where you're kind of like, well, do I really need it? But if you don't have it and you get asked for it, your whole trip could be up in smoke, and it's just not worth the risk. I would always check destination specific laws, because this is going to be one of those ones which is a little trickier, I think, than others. And it's important as well to not rely on everything you see on the internet, because like I said, what I found on the internet was not what the airline told me. So it's always, always best to do your due diligence, just call and find the answers. And again, if you're booking with a travel advisor, the reason that I called is because my client was the one traveling and I didn't want to give them wrong information and risk them being denied boarding at the airport. So that's something that we will do, obviously, as your travel advisor, is find out for you what the real answers are. Finally, to very briefly touch on a question that we actually do get asked a lot is, can I travel to such and such a place with a prior conviction? And to that, I am not going to answer one way or the other. I'm going to tell you that it depends on the country and it depends on the conviction. So that is all I really can say about that. And it's up to you as the traveler to phone an embassy, phone a consulate, that sort of thing, because we really can't get involved in that kind of thing. But there are ways that you can find out about it. And I will just leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for watching my video today. I hope you enjoyed this information. I would love to know if you found anything surprising. So please drop a comment down below. And if you're liking what you see so far, please like and subscribe to my channel and follow along as we go on this journey together.